Thank you very much, Giovanni, for introduction. So my name is Hyunsoo from National University of Singapore. Today, I'm going to talk about spin-based neuromorphic and unconventional computing. It's mostly stochastic computing in our approach. So probably I can skip this introductory slide to save some time. So basically, we want to have a new architecture better than the conventional von Neumann architecture where processing and storage units are separated. But if you look at our human brain, for example, processing and storage is combined in the same physical location. And it has also ability to learn, adopt, and then it can consume much lower power for some kind of interesting complex problem solving. So if you look at the details of this biological processor, synapse gives some weight to the input signal and also modulate the membrane potential of the post neuron. On the other hand, if you look at neuron, it's not a static object, but it's like excitable cells. It can fire once the threshold is reached, and also after firing, it can go back to the initial condition, which is basically automatic reset function. So we requires a device, to emulate the synapse and neuron to mimic like brain-like functionalities. So many devices, have been proposed from various communities. I think one of the typical one is using memristor-based synaptic device. In this case, basically they utilize the ionic motion inside this tunneling channel and relying on very stochastic behavior due to the origin of this device operation. And it kind of mimics very well about the real human body operation, because if you look at our human body, basically, this potassium ion basically in and out, and the membrane potential change, and then it fire, and then, it automatically reset. It has high density using this membrane, so people can make easily, two-dimensional array using, conventional B-line and then word line concept. And it has a very simple process. But the problem is read-write latency is relatively long. And also because of two-terminal nature, it has high read error rate. And the other problem is it cannot make negative synaptic weight. And also you have to break the filament with a very large voltage to make a reset. So basically there is no sort of depotentiation typically in this device. So we propose this spin-based synapse. Basically it's a three-terminal device utilizing so-called spin-orbit torque operation principle. So we can flow current in the channel. Let me use a laser pointer. Then depending on this current, we can generate basically the spin accumulation into a certain direction, and we can write. And in the meantime, we can use a gate voltage. Using gadolinium oxide, we can change the oxygen content inside this cobalt layer. And depending on how much oxygen we send, basically we can change the anisotropy of cobalt, at the same time the perpendicular magnetization. So basically we measure anomalous Hall using Hall bar. So we measure how strong is the perpendicular magnetization of this cobalt layer. So depending on the content of oxygen, we can very gradually moderate the level of magnetization from up to even the full down state. So basically that will represent our synaptic output. So we can make positive, meaning pointing up, or even negative, pointing down of this cobalt layer. We have a different read-write path, so it's relatively stable against read error, and it can be potentially high speed and low power, also high endurance, because we don't involve any very high current through the oxide. But the problem is it involved anomalous Hall signal, so the output signal is very small compared to conventional device. That's the one of the weaknesses of our device. So this device shows very good synaptic plasticity and show clear spike magnitude dependence. So we can apply positive gate voltage and we can just keep increasing this anomalous Hall signal. If we apply negative, we can keep decreasing those signal depending on the gate potential. If we apply stronger gate, we can basically potentiate much quickly. With the smaller voltage, we can go slowly and so on. Also, it shows spike delay dependence. So depending on pulse delay of two pulses, for example, if two pulses are very close, basically there is a close correlation. So we'll have a strong spike, time dependent behavior. That is basically STDP. If we put two pulses, far away, basically the potential will increase slowly and the correlation will be very, very weak. So our device basically very mimic the real behavior of this real synapse. Also, it shows kind of learning and forgetting behavior. By applying the gate voltage, we can potentiate, increase the potential. Once we turn off and then just wait, basically we have a leaky behavior. So the signal automatically decay. So we measure this, the decay time constant, as a function of number of training pulses beforehand. So if we give more training pulses and then just wait, basically this time constant of decaying will be much longer, meaning once you study more, basically the information stay longer in our human brain. So it really mimic like long-term memory. If we train less, basically it mimic kind of short-term memory. The state of spintronics neuron is rather limited compared to synapse. Typical spintronics neuron fire immediately without any threshold behavior. So if you give a small pulse in the spintronic device, it will just fire small amount. If you give a big pulse, basically it fires strongly. So basically there's no threshold behavior. This is a problem. Another biggest problem is there is no automatic reset. Once the device fire, basically we need to give a reset, input signal so the device can go to the, original baseline. This is again, sort of, problem. It requires more complex signaling to the device, and which is very different from the real biological device or process. So we try to develop this spintronic neuron which can spike, but at the same time it can reset automatically after firing. So our approach is using this antiferromagnet and ferromagnetic exchange bias system. And antiferromagnet, can basically bias. It can hold this ferromagnet's magnetization along the certain direction with the preferred direction. And once we eliminate basically the input current, it can go back to certain magnetization state in this copper layer. So using this approach by optimizing those thickness and so on, we found optimum system. So if you look at, we can increase the current in this spin orbital device. Then once it reaches the threshold point, basically it will fire. It changes its magnetization direction. Then once we remove this, current, it can go back to this initial, position. So basically, it shows kind of automatic reset-like behavior in our device. And this, the polarity is controllable using an external field direction. And we try to examine this behavior using different device size. And the 20 micron is shown, this red and orange. And then if we scale down to 10 micron, this green one, so it can fire with a much smaller current. And then 400 nanometer device can fire obviously with much smaller current because it requires similar current density to fire. Also, we tested endurance after firing 500 rounds still we can see a quite clear firing and reset behavior by just modulating the input current. We measure this behavior many times, and we observe as we scale down to smaller size, there is high probability to see this stochastic behavior. And at certain current, we see those firing and reset is later stochastic, which is magnified here, as you can see. So depending on the pulse number, the position, or basically synaptic potential is later stochastic. So we draw the switching percentage as a function of current, and then we can see a very nice sigmoid function-like behavior, which really show this is a really good unit of a stochastic computing cell, which can be used as probabilistic inference model. So we want to apply this one for voice separation. If you think about this, typical cocktail party problem, people, can easily track one particular person's voice when multiple talkers, present. But this is a very difficult problem to machine, because especially in a very noisy and far field condition, voice can be mixed up. If you think about video or image, if you have a good camera, or you just look at the particular location, basically image is not mixed, but voice basically traveling, so it's mixed up. So this kind of the approach can be utilized in many interesting applications, like speech recognition, chatting robot, security monitoring, self-driving car, and so on. But the challenge is it's very difficult to identify the number of speakers. And then also we have a permutation problem. The order of speaker has an impact during training. And also we need a tremendous amount of training data set, complex training cycle, and also huge power consumption. At this moment, the voice recognition, the error rate is about 23% using the state-of-the-art algorithm. So how can we do this real-time audio signal separation? So real audio, can be separated, and then we can, just pick up a target audio from multiple source. Basically, we first convert the signal using the fast Fourier transform. Then we just move this time domain data in the frequency domain. Then we can utilize this neural-like stochastic computers. Then after processing the data, we use inverse Fourier transform. Then we can get the target audio signal. So this is the sort of big approach. Then since we have this stochastic neural device, which can basically fire different rate at different current, this can be utilized as basically neuron firing unit. And we can use multiple of those stochastic neural devices to form a group, and each one can be associated with a particular frequency. And then there is a different sort of the timbre of voice. Then we can train each device at a particular frequency, and then change the synaptic weight depending on the training. So that will give a sort of group of neurons with the different weightage. So this is our architecture. So basically, we are working on 15 cells, basically 15 devices, and each one is our stochastic SOT device. And then it's connected to FPGA as a main sort of processing unit, and then also is connected with the weight memory. and we store our weight here, and then sort of update those memory depending on the training and processing. So we believe this is a simple architecture and could be, high speed and potentially also low power consumption and noise and fault tolerant. So as I mentioned, we allocate the different 15 SOT devices as a basis, and then each device is basically corresponding to different frequency. And then we can have this parallel connection and updating the weightage, then it works like a sound filter. So once we go through this sound filter to separate our target signal, then we use this weight memory to store those weightage value, and then use FPGA to control the data transfer between the weight memory and our computing cells. So I'm going to show you some preliminary result. This one shows the separation of violin signal from mixed source. Okay. So you can, hear, those two mixed sounds of violin and piano. Okay, then this is after using these devices, and then filter out, and then apply the inverse Fourier transform. So you can hear only violin sound after this. Oops. Okay, so basically, as a quick summary, we show basically spin-based neural-like computing system is like a more stochastic computing. This can be high endurance and potentially low power compared to full software basis, and also could be high speed. And importantly, it could be noisy and fault tolerant computing with quite accurate result. The population output corresponds to time average of the stochastic firing pattern, which makes them very robust to noise. And imperfection of a single junction of damaging or some problem in our, one of the SOT device, for example, can be neglected in, multiple population coding, because we utilize, as a group of many of those. So of course, I'm not the one who took the data in the lab daily. I want to acknowledge, who took all this interesting data, Dr. Chi Yang and Dr. Xia Ji, and also my previous group member, Professor Lahul Mishra, who is now a professor in IIT. Thank you very much for your attention.